The Old Testament documents a massive problem of scale, an infinite creator attempting to communicate with a fragile, finite human race. Direct exposure to the raw presence of God is described as lethal. The finite simply cannot contain the infinite without being destroyed. To navigate this, the creator utilized theophanies, veiled physical encounters that functioned like a protective barrier. He would appear as a pillar of cloud or a fire that burned within a desert bush without consuming the wood. These early interactions were handled by a manifestation known as the Angel of the Lord. This figure operated as a shielded mouthpiece, speaking with the direct authority of the Creator while allowing the human observer to survive the encounter. But these ancient veils were never intended to be the final state. They were a slow, careful opening sequence designed to prepare humanity for a much closer, unshielded interaction. Over several centuries, the prophetic record began to outline a rigid set of historical and biological specifications. It wasn't a vague hope, but a profile defined by hundreds of independent, predictive markers. These specifications were housed in the physical record of the Hebrew Scriptures. On these parchment fragments, parameters for a future arrival were locked in. The records described a servant entering the physical world specifically to be sacrificed as a ransom for human rebellion. The geographical requirements were equally narrow. This figure had to descend from David's royal line and physically originate in the small, ancient town of Bethlehem. Finally, the prophet Daniel added a cosmic dimension to the profile. He foresaw a Son of Man appearing on the clouds of heaven to take an everlasting dominion that would never pass away. History began to narrow toward a single point.
These requirements, spanning lineage, geography, and cosmic power, created a target so small that it excluded every other individual in human history. The invisible God finally entered the physical world in 1st century Judea. The historical record shifts from anticipation to the person of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus validated his identity by operating with the same authority over the material world that the Creator demonstrated in the ancient texts. He reversed biological decay on command. Those born blind were suddenly granted sight, and lifelong leprosy was instantly cleansed, showing a power that operated at a cellular level. This authority extended to the planet itself. The physical forces of nature responded to his voice, with violent storms and towering waves instantly collapsing into stillness at his command. These works were the physical evidence that the ancient, veiled creator was now operating openly and tangibly on the human plane. But the profile established centuries earlier demanded a sacrifice. The debt of human sin required a biological payment that only a physical body could provide. This was achieved through the brutal reality of a Roman execution. Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate, satisfying the ancient requirement for a suffering servant. His death was biologically final. He was buried inside a sealed tomb, guarded by a Roman detail, to ensure that the physical record of his life ended there. 3 days later, the reversal began. The author of life broke the hold of death, exiting the tomb with a resurrected physical body. He spent 40 days appearing to hundreds of witnesses, eating with them and encouraging them to touch his wounds, before ascending out of the physical sight of his disciples. The empty tomb was the ultimate proof of his power, but the ascension left the narrative unfinished. He left behind a promise that the escalation of his power was only beginning. The resurrection set history on a new trajectory. It introduced a countdown toward a final resolution where the current, corrupted world order would be completely unmade. Eventually, the timeline hits a hard vertical barrier. The universe as we know it dissolves, hitting the moment of consummation, where the old world and its systems are stripped away. The ancient texts describe a moment of such intensity that the earth and the heavens literally flee from the face of the judge, melting into a sea of molten, glowing ash. The time for veils, angels, and burning bushes is gone. The universe is finally forced to face the raw, unshielded reality of its creator. In this final moment, the sky splits open, fulfilling Daniel's vision of the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. The returning king appears with inescapable power and great glory. The humble carpenter is replaced by a silhouette of blinding, overwhelming light. He is surrounded by a vast host of dazzling, white-robed angels, their presence filling the atmosphere as they sound the final trump of God. This arrival triggers 2 distinct reactions. For those who rejected the record, it is a moment of sheer terror.
But for the multitude who recognized the profile, it is the ultimate vindicated joy. This is the grand escalation. The God who once hid in a bush and bled on a hill has finally arrived as the undisputed king, ready to establish a new heaven and a new earth that will never end.